that's why we're here today. We'll fix it.
Right.
So in a situation where she has an RNC today, and then she has a proposed business, which the FLU would forbid that, is there, if she wanted to do that next week, would she go through a variance process to override the FLU? Is that possible, or is it?
So our land development code doesn't allow for a use variance. It would have to be a rezoning of the, of the future land use.
Okay.
So in the case of a situation that just occurred, where someone has a property that's zoned, or I guess the future land use would be R1 AA, how would someone go about if they wanted to build more than one unit on that property? How would they go about doing that? I mean, is the only way going through a zoning change?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, let me clarify. If someone, if it's an RAA, you can build more than one unit.
Yes.
It would have to either be a duplex or a townhome.
Depending upon the size of the lot.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Correct.
If you have a special plan development that was established under RNC, and that has now changed to, I guess, medium density residential, does that also affect the special plan development if it was mixed use?
Is this special plan development something that actually was developed? And
No, it wasn't developed. It was approved, it just never,
how long ago was it approved?
Long time.
2008.
This is still.
Yeah, I would imagine if it was approved, it'd have to be grandfathered. I'll have to check and see if there's any time limitations on it. But you should be okay, being that it was fully approved.
But if I transfer ownership of the property,
It runs with the land.
okay.
I'm curious about the definition of RNC, or uses permitted. I've heard it come up in conversation with folks in the neighborhood. What if we don't want some of these uses? Is there a way that we could exclude some of these uses for an RNC property in the neighborhood?
So, and that was one of my earlier questions, is the issue that we want to tailor the residential, or do we want to tailor the RNC to, if the neighborhood's not satisfied with the RNC, then perhaps let's tailor a commercial district for Belmont as well.
Or create a totally distinct district for Belmont de Villiers that would be an overlay. We are currently about to embark on the development of redevelopment overlay, which was part of the CRA update plan with special design guidelines for the redevelopment area. And we are about to embark on that. So that does create an opportunity to develop something that is specific just to Belmont de Villiers. And I piggyback on what John said about, okay, so this plan initially envisioned creating new districts for this area, and we kind of ended up going with making what we had fit. But we certainly have an opportunity and can create a special overlay district, redevelopment overlay district for Belmont de Villiers. And so we can kind of, in that case, kind of tailor. Currently, the vision is also not only uses, but to provide some aesthetic review, some aesthetic control over what can be done there.
John, I would add to that, that's really the only way to get a yes to your question.
Mhm.
So, I can't recall it exactly, but if you were to repeat your question, the answer is no, except with an overlay district.
I
And
mean,
that tool can become wildly complicated or very simple. It can be from granting these simple exceptions that you're wanting to white picket fence specifications and everything in between.
Well, and you could do it either way. You could do an overlay, or you could spell out separate districts. North Hill has, their special districts, and then of course the special review by ARB. So you could take it or leave either one of them. You wouldn't have to have both.
So you can take or leave the ARB restriction?
Yeah, so you could tailor a residential, you could tailor the districts to be what you want and not have to have ARB approval.
Back in 2005, I think was the last time it was brought forth. Planning staff had been working on what was called a neighborhood conservation overlay district. So that's a concept that could go forward, or some other iteration, as Brandy had mentioned, and I jumped in here for a reason. I've forgotten, but you don't have to. That proposed that you did not have to go necessarily to ARB. That's why I jumped in. It made review an administrative process, so that you would come into staff, you come into either building inspections or planning, and present what you want to do, and that is reviewed against this overlay zoning. So as long as you met that, then you're fine. The staff could sign off on it. And only in the case where there would be a dispute would it have to go then to ARB. In that way, keeping the costs for reviews down. We talked about affordability. I heard affordability mentioned. Keeping the cost of development down, and keeping it fairly a streamlined process, so that typically a project that comes in just goes to staff, unless there is, unless you don't like staff's interpretation, then you have an option to appeal to the ARB, which then there would be a cost.
May I ask a question? Are we at a point, and when I say we, I'm speaking of the city of Pensacola, where the overlay districts really now have some teeth?
It has not been developed as of yet. We are poised to move forward to prepare it, and I think this is a good time because it will allow all of this input to go through.
Okay. The reason I bring that up is because one option, and hear me, I'm only saying this as an option. The RNC, which is what it was originally designated, it had C1, C2, and RNC throughout the area. And that's what the majority of the people and the property owners know and aware of. That may be the basis that we work from. And then we began to go ahead and formally develop our overlay. I mean, we have, and I say we, I'm speaking of the neighborhood. We have a list of ideas and things that we wanted incorporated into an overlay. Because this has, as you said earlier, been part of a discussion for years. The reality of it is that it never really, the city was not at a position where the overlay district carried any kind of weight or teeth to it. It became, here's what we want. We want the structures raised a little bit above grade, at least a couple of feet. We like the pitch roofs. It was all economical and it was simple. And we can have a list of guidelines that would be simple that a lot of the neighborhood people had expressed. Now, if we could then formulate that overlay and it could be accepted with some teeth to it, then that means projects that come forward would then have some of the guidelines that people wanted. The big confusion factor is, just as one of our members spoke, she has a piece of property and she wanted to do a little sewing center on her property. She's thinking, well, I've got commercial, or I have the sorority house on one side of me, I have a little lodge down the street, and I have a beauty shop next door. I want to commit to teaching sewing. She's not trying to build a large complex, but that's something she's committed to. It would be scrutinized under the overlay in terms of appearance, but the guidelines will still, in terms of setbacks, parking, what you could or could not do, will still fall in play as well.
And I think the first step, just my opinion, is that the zoning is more critical because we've had issues where it's caused us trouble, but the overlay could certainly be in the works as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you need to establish what you want, the uses and the density, and then the overlay could come next.
Is there any way that planning through the CRA could
have an amnesty period where anyone who is currently a property owner that believes their property in the future land use doesn't match what they expected could come and just have a single hearing where all of these are kind of reviewed and CRA pick up that expense so that we, I mean, it's just a matter of $3,500 to get a rezoning is a substantial investment if all you really want to do is convert your garage into a training center. But if the CRA, as part of its enhancing and helping the neighborhood to get up, could see fit to support getting these zoning questions that are kind of hanging out there because of this not having been processed over the last 11 years, then maybe we could get those corrected, and then it would kind of resolve the current crisis that we seem to be.
That's what
you know,
we're here for.
But well, I'm just asking, you know, is there a mechanism by which the CRA could pick up that $3,500 tab or waive
No,
it?
we're
The CRA
here.
doesn't have a fund.
No, and
for
there's
that.
no fees associated with this process here because there's a mismatch. So this is staff driven, and that's why.
So if today the consensus of people here was that her area should be rezoned RNC, you're going to then move it forward as RNC, is that?
well,
what you're-
our hopes is that we would take the whole neighborhood and move it forward. You know,
So-
if we needed to piecemeal one or two because it's time sensitive, then we could do a hybrid like we did with the door, where we get a letter from the neighborhood association and we make it somewhat of a hybrid request. Because it's not fair to have folks spend $3,500 on an issue that, you know, that was
Right.
an error years ago.
Right,
Right.
and that's exactly why we, you know, have been pushing for it. At the same time, have all property owners been individually notified of this meeting? I know they were notified of the Adora meeting, but were they individually notified of this meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Every property
Okay,
owner
so all
in
property
the
owners got a
area
card.
does, And I have
Okay.
this for you.
Okay. That's
The
fine, I
list,
just,
the
some
mailing
people had
list.
told me they had not, I mean, they didn't know about it, and I said you had to have gotten, you know, something. And I know y'all ran an ad, and it came out from planning for a general public, you know, input, but just want to make sure we got that on the record, so that.
Cards were sent to every property owner.
Yeah, my card came at 1:30 this
So
afternoon.
So many people probably still have not even read
Right,
that
so
there's a
you
meeting.
really didn't have time to process it
Right.
and understand what, you know. I
Well,
said, well, I
and-
better run down here because I wanna know what my zoning is on my property, for whatever I do, cause right now my property is vacant. So, yeah, and with me just, if I had not got that and happened to be in one of the meetings, neighborhood meetings, I wouldn't have known about this meeting at all.
Sure. And now this
And if I
is
hadn't
just,
been at home at 1:30 this afternoon, I still wouldn't.
this is just very, very preliminary. There's going to be, you know, once we get a consensus from the neighborhood, there's going to be 3 or 4 months of this public hearing. So this is just the very beginning of the process.
The point I was trying to make, Brandy, is you'll get a consensus of those of us who are here. But like myself, being with the neighborhood association, I am not a property owner, so actually what I'm saying should not weigh as much as the 15 property owners who do not even know this meeting is going on. Because the real consensus is people who own the property that, you know, need to be giving input. So that's the only reason I bring that up, because we keep doing this where a committee or 1 or 2 people are addressed, and what they say is what's moved forward, as opposed to everyone who is impacted having an equal vote.
Well, unfortunately, it's hard to, you'll never get a 100% response. I mean, you do the best that you can. You send out notice, you put it on the website, and I'm very sorry. The best that we can do is to do those things. And perhaps you have another suggestion of how we can get, because our goal here and our goal and our effort is to get a consensus. Either, I mean, there's 2 options. We can put this out and offer people to the opportunity to come and be a part of the consensus building effort. We can make a staff level decision, which is what we do not want to do. What we want to do is simply, as Brandy said, we want to align the 2, the future and the zoning.